This is ABTV, Animal Bites Television.
So we're finally getting settled into our new building, and it's been a while since I've done a show where I've just kind of looked around and showed you some really cool animals. So today, that's what I'm going to do. No planning, no scripting, just kind of look around and show you some really cool animals. And of course, I'm going to start with this guy right here. This is actually a banana cal king. And of course, California king snakes are from the West Coast, obviously. And they're a king snake that gets maybe about 4 to 5 foot, about this big around or so. So they're not a really large animal, but they're a really good option when it comes to pet. And they have a lot of polymorphism and morphs out there. And this happens to be what they call a polygenic trait, which just means that the normal cal king is going to be brown and yellow banded, and through generation after generation of continuing to breed the highest yellow animals, eventually you get animals that are like this that are predominantly completely yellow. As a matter of fact, the early ones still had a lot of brown in their bellies, which basically was like the brown and the bandings would move down to their bellies. As you can see now, a lot of the new ones are even lacking most of the yellow or the brown in that belly, which is really cool. My name is Brian Barczyk. I'm no zoologist, just a guy with a passion for animals. And that passion often takes me on animal adventures around the world. This week, I'm at BHB just showing off some cool reptiles. You're watching Snake Bites. This happens to be a hypomelanistic stripe. So what you see in the wild is you'll see banded animals and you'll see striped animals. This happens to be the striped animal, and it's again hypomelanistic, which is a recessive mutation, meaning that when you breed them you can produce more, but you get the heterozygous genes first. And again, the hypocal king just is that kind of fading of melanism, kind of looks a little bit more chocolatey. But of course there's chocolate cal kings, and there's just a whole bunch. Albinos and lavender snows, and cal kings are just a really good animal. Again, they breed really well. They're good pets. They're relatively docile, although they do have a pretty intense feeding response, so you have to watch your fingers when you're feeding them. And of course, this is a Pueblan milk snake, but just like the hypocal king, this is a hypomelanistic Pueblan milk snake. And it's just kind of cool. We were working with some of the really early hypomelanistic Pueblan milk snakes that came out. And again, just like the cal king, it's a recessive mutation. And I've just always really loved these guys, because one of the problems with some of the milk snakes with that black, yellow, and red triads, which is the banding, is that sometimes they get a lot of black tipping and it kind of muddies them up when they get older. And of course the hypomelanistic makes it super uber clean because it reduces the majority of the black or the melanin. So as they get older, they become really beautiful. So sometimes it's just kind of cool to walk around and pull snakes out. You know, a lot of times, to be honest with you, in the evenings, that's exactly what I do. I always tell people I'm kind of a business from 8 o'clock to 4 o'clock, because that's when really my crew is working and if I have company over. But then after 4 o'clock, I often stay here for, 3 or 4 hours just by myself. And sometimes I'm working, but a lot of times I am just kind of playing. I'm just looking at animals. So it's kind of, I wanted to kind of bring you guys in on one of those times. And of course, this is an albino goini, or an albino blotched king snake. These guys are from like the panhandle of Florida. And a lot of people think that there's even a chance that they could be a naturally occurring integrate at somewhere down the road between the chain kings and the Brooks kings or Florida king snakes, which really does make sense, because although right now the areas don't overlap, at one time they probably could have, and they do remind me of a lot of a chain king and certainly a lot of a Brooks king. So they're really cool, really heavy feed responses. And of course we're working with the albinos and the blazes, and it's really cool. And speaking of Brooks kings, there's a whole bunch of different really cool Brooks kings, and I've always been a fan of them. And they're just a big snake, a big colubrid that has an aggressive feeding habit. And as you can see, the babies can be a little nippy, and certainly the adults are really fired up when it comes to feeding. But the truth is, they're super tame animals. I mean, these guys make really good pets. And a lot of colubrids are a little bit more spaz, they run around a lot. These guys, especially when they get bigger, are really chill, so you can kind of just play with them and they hang out. And this, of course, is an albino, which is a recessive mutation. But again, there's a lot of different paint jobs of Brooks kings, and I'll kind of show you a handful of them now. As a matter of fact, let's walk over here. Like, oh my God, it starts out where there's stuff like ghost Brooks kings, for instance. This is a ghost Brooks, which is actually a double recessive mutation. There's a hypo Brooks king, which much like the Pueblan and the cal king we were talking about, it's just lacking some of that black pigment. And then there's an anuthristic, or really an axanthic as well. I always call it an axantheristic because it's lacking both red and yellow pigment, but I don't want to confuse you guys too much. So essentially this is an anuthristic and a hypomelanistic, and they call it a ghost Brooks king snake, which is really cool. But then you can get into things like jellybrooks. Like this is really cool. This is a kind of one of the more newer mutations of Brooks king snakes, but I mean not too new. It's been around probably 7 or 8 years, but there haven't been a whole lot of brand new morphs in a while. So this is what they call a jellybrooks. And again, the animal itself almost looks a little hypomelanistic, but it does some pretty cool stuff when you start breeding it into other mutations. So it's not quite like the hypomelanistic. As a matter of fact, like here's an albino jelly right here. And again, the albino brooks are really neat, but when you add that albino jelly, it just kind of adds a new level of kind of interest to it. And of course, we have some that are even, you know, like white and pink, which are really cool. And then when you start combining things into, say, like hypomelanistic and white, whoa, this guy jumped out here, the hypo-white-sided Brooks Kings. So white-sided Brooks Kings are basically like a Brooks King that are just white on their sides, and this is the hypomelanistic version of it. As a matter of fact, let me show you the anuthristic version, which would, oh, come on, get in there. God, he's a flighty little bugger, isn't he? So this is the anuri, and this looks a lot like the normal white-sided, but they're lacking that yellow pigment, so they're just a little bit more bicolored. But so that gives you an idea of what basically a white-sided Brooks is going to look like. But this, in this case, it's an anuri white-sided. So again, when I say double recessive, just like the hypo white-sided or ghost Brooks, or even the anuri white-sided, what I basically mean is you're taking two color mutations that are both recessive, you're breeding them together, you basically are going to produce normal-looking babies that have a 1 in 16 chance odds of producing the double recessive mutation. Now, once you have the double recessive mutation, you can breed those together and they'll breed pure, or you can breed a double recessive to, say, a double het, and you're going to get, you know, 1 in 4 of the double mutations and all the other mutations involved as well, too. So they're pretty neat. Now, when you combine the hypo and the anuthristic, now you're getting a triple recessive mutation, and that of course would be the ghost white-sided Brooks. So again, we showed you the ghost Curran earlier, or ghost Brooks earlier, which is anuthristic and hypomelanistic, and then we showed you the hypo white-sided and anuri white-sided. This is all of those mutations put together, and again, that's a ghost white-sided Brooks, and I tell you, this thing is absolutely amazing. Again, it's just kind of cool to look around, and you know, when you're working every day with things, sometimes you don't take the time to stop and just see the beauty of the animals. So when I get a chance to just spend that time in the evening, or now when we're filming, it just is really cool to see these animals. I mean, it's this is what it's all about, you know. I mean, this is just enjoying the animals, and this is why I started working with snakes and breeding snakes for a living, is really just because I love it to death, you know. And so there's it's always nice to show stuff off. And this happens to be a snow Honduran milk snake, and I've always loved the Honduran milk snakes. Again, really big, probably one of the bigger of the tricolored milk snakes, and certainly the Hondurans are probably one of the tamer ones as well. So that's why I really love them. And of course, this is an albino and an anuthristic, and we've been talking about mutations, so I think you guys are starting to get the idea of what that means. As a matter of fact, like this would be another double recessive, like we had showed you guys the ghost Brooks Kings. This is a ghost Honduran milk snake. So again, it's an anuthristic and a hypomelanistic, whereas that was an anuthristic and an albino. So you kind of get the idea. And of course, you know, one of the early mutations that really started all the kind of craze in Hondurans was just the albino Honduran milk snake. And of course, I've told the story before about us being fortunate enough to bring the very first albino Honduran milk snakes into the country. So it's pretty exciting. And then there's just all kinds, you know, these are really cool animals. And I hope that I can figure a way to produce these guys in the future, because to be honest with you, I only have 2 males, so it's not going to work out really well. But hopefully I can find some females, and these are what they call Scott's garter snakes, and they're a Mexican garter snake. But look at the green in that animal and how absolutely gorgeous it is. And again, it kind of stinks that I only have 2 males, but I was always interested in this, so when I got offered them, I wasn't going to pass up the opportunity, so I ended up getting the ones I had. And again, hopefully in the future we'll get some more. And of course, this is one of my grow out Rhino Rat Snakes, and this guy is just turning from that gray brown color to its adult green color. Again, it's not quite as green as it's going to get, but this is how they look when they start to go through that change. And what an amazing animal. And Rhino Rats are certainly on the top of the list for me when it comes to the most beautiful and interesting colubrids out there, for sure. So I'm really fortunate to be able to be breeding these guys for the last few years. And of course, another snake that has always just blown me away are these little typical gray-banded king snakes. Again, these guys are from Texas, and in particular West Texas, and it's really a big thing for a lot of herpers to go out, you know, herping in West Texas to find locality-specific gray-banded king snakes. And this is just what they would call a Blair's phase, which is just that wider red bands with the nice gray bands. There's also alternative phase that has got very little red and more just black and gray, which are really beautiful. And there are some mutations in these guys now too. There's hypomelanistic, there's aneurystic, there's even ghost, and now there's even some leucistics out there. So gray-banded king snakes are really neat, but they do take a little level of expertise because they're a little bit tricky when they're babies. They really are lizard feeders in the wild, so it's something to kind of keep an eye on if you're thinking about getting into them. But you know, there's an interesting new product that I'm interested in. It's called Reptile Links. So it's actually like a sausage for snakes, and if they can lizard scent those sausages like they have been doing with frogs and toads, I think that the gray-banded kings will be a much better animal for everybody to keep. And of course, this is actually a licorice stick black rat snake, and I've been working with black rat snakes since I was like 16 years old, and I've just always loved them to death. They're actually native here to Michigan, although I've never seen one around, so I don't know what this is. But these guys originated out in Maryland, in the Baltimore area. Guy produced these guys, a recessive mutation. He originally found one in the wild at some point, bred it out, and the reason he called it licorice sticks is he thought that the back looked like a piece of licorice, black licorice, and so that's why they got their name. And of course, now a lot of these mutations, like some blood pythons, and we showed you earlier with the Brooks King, you know, most of the time they're being called white-sided instead of licorice, but the black rat licorice stuck, which was kind of cool. And this is an animal that I've always thought was really cool, but Lori certainly doesn't share my opinion about how cool these guys are. And this is an albino greenish rat snake, and these guys are endemic down to southeast Florida and stuff like that. And you know, some people look at them as kind of a junk rat snake, but I've always liked the greenish rat snakes for some reason, and the albinos are even cooler. But you can see why Lori and some other people don't quite like them as much, because sometimes they have a little bit of a cantankerous attitude, but I like it. I think it's really cool, and they're pretty, and listen, I love it. So let's just go find some more snakes. Texas rat snakes are another animal that I've kind of always been fascinated with, really since I was kind of young and I saw the picture of the first leucistic Texas rat snake, which I'll show you here in a minute. But it was Bernd Bechtel that actually produced the first leucistic Texas rat, and it's an interesting story. He had a wild-caught animal, he had bred it, it was a female, and she laid one fertile egg in the water. And so literally, he took that one egg and he was able to save it, ended up hatching it and produced the first het, turned out to be a male, bred it back to the mom, and produced leucistic Texas rat snakes. I think that's just an awesome story. So anyways, this happens to be a snow Texas rat snake, and some Texas rat snakes are a lot like the greenish rats, where they're a little bit fired up and they get a little bit of an attitude, but they can be tamed out really well. So the snow is basically an aneurystic and an albino, and it was actually kind of a surprise that we produced them a few years back, so I was kind of geeked about it. And of course, I was talking to you about this leucistics, the ones that Bernd Bechtel proved out years ago, and what really made me love those animals. And who doesn't love a pure white snake like this, right? And this is it here. This is a leucistic Texas rat snake. And again, when I was young, I remember buying my first ones. They were like $500 a piece, and I was only like 17, 18 years old, so it seemed like a ton of money to me. And I remember coming home with them that day that I got the pair, and I was just so excited. And all these years later, I'm still working with them, and I'm still just as excited about them, which is really cool. Now, what's interesting is when you combine the two together, you get pink-eyed leucistic Texas rat snakes. So you still get that solid white animal, but they've got the pink eyes. And again, those are just called pink-eyed leucistics. So it's just basically an albino leucistic, which is really cool. And I've got a couple other scaleless Texas rat snakes I want to share with you in a minute, but since I'm standing right here, I want to show you these guys. Whew! Man, they're lightning quick too. These are actually albino Korean rat snakes, and Korean rat snakes aren't really that common in the pet trade for sure. You don't see very many of them out there, and the albinos are even more uncommon. So it's pretty cool. I just love them. Look at the pattern on that. I mean, for an albino, that's a beautiful snake, and it's just such a cool pattern. So I love those guys. But back to Texas rat snakes. Let's show you. I've been working on kind of trying to do you know, some really beautiful scaleless Texas rat snakes. So not just normal Texas rat snakes, scaleless, but the ones that are just really beautifully pastel colored. And we've been really successful with our line now producing some super, super beautiful ones like this. Like, look at that right there. And I'll give you a kind of comparison. Like, this is what a normal scaleless Texas rat snake typically looks like. Still a really beautiful snake. I mean, certainly beautiful. But then now we're starting to get these really beautiful, clean pastel looks. And I'll even show you another one in comparison from the same line. And again, we're line breeding these, so we're able to really bring out this color. Look at that. I mean, look at how beautiful that is. And as they get older, they even get better. So we're really excited about this particular line of scaleless. And again, we're excited that it's actually breeding true, which is really cool. And of course, if you really want to get freaked out, take a look at this little alien monkey here. This happens to be a Leucistic scaleless Texas rat snake. It's just weird because, you know, you don't see all these wrinkles in the normal scaleless snake, and I think that they're there. It's just that the pattern kind of covers them up. So as soon as you get them into Leucistic, it almost looks like an old man snake. But this is a cool animal. Take a look at these guys here. Now, I absolutely have always loved these little pythons, and again, that's what this is. This is a children's python from Australia. And again, they don't get much larger. This is actually a pretty big female, kind of a little chunky to be totally honest with you. But there's a whole kind of subset of these animals here, all Anteraceae. There's children's pythons, spotted pythons, anthill pythons, Stimson's pythons. So they're all really cool little Australian pythons. And the thing that's neat is that they're a python, but this is as big as they get. And like I said, this girl's a pretty chunky girl too. And I'm excited to be breeding these again. I've been breeding them for many years, but this year I'm really focusing to try to produce some cool ones. And then of course these are the spotted pythons, which typically they're maculosa, which is typically a little larger than the children's pythons. But ironically enough, sometimes the children's pythons can have more eggs, even though they are typically the slightly smaller species. But you can see the spotteds are much darker than the children's pythons, and they have that beautiful iridescence. But again, if you want a python, but you don't want one that gets really large, this is a great kind of choice, really. It's almost like a corn snake sized python, which is really cool. They got great dispositions, and of course my buddy Pete at Criticam is the Anteraceae expert of the world for sure. I mean, I go to his place and I'm like, oh my God, I wish we could have some of those animals. Of course, all the stuff that we have in the country now has been here for 25, 35 years, who knows how long, and it was before the kind of ban from getting stuff out of Australia. And this is a really cool animal, and I don't even really know what the origins of these animals are, to be honest with you, but that's what they call a granite spotted python. So again, it's a spotted python just like the maculosa, but it is a recessive mutation that gives it that kind of really granity look. And again, I've got to do some research and find out who the first person to produce these guys were, but I know it was produced here in America. I don't even know if there's any in Australia. There might be, but there's certainly probably very few. The vast majority of them are here in America, and really cool animals, huh? Sticking with the Australian animals, certainly Woma Pythons are incredible, and I've had this girl for a long time. I think that she's probably, I don't know, 13, 14 years old now, so I've had this little girl for a long time, and she's produced a whole bunch of baby Woma Pythons, and I don't know, it's just a really special snake to me. I mean, the fact that she's been so good to me for so long, and I remember getting her from Don Hamper, like I said, 13, 14, 15 years ago, whatever it was, and at the time they were $15,000 for the pair, and I remember almost being sick to my stomach when I bought them, because I thought, what did I just do, spend $15,000 on a pair of snakes? But the truth is now they're relatively affordable, but man, they are still so cool. And again, these guys are endemic to all over Australia. There's westerns and easterns, and I've never had the pleasure of seeing one of these guys in the wild, but I hope one day that I'll get out there and see them for sure, because they are just such a beautifully cool animal. And moving on to Central America now, and certainly one of my favorite snakes in the collection is this guy here. Take a look at this monkey. Holy cow, look at that snake. This is actually a Colubrid snake, and I've shown off Maya before, my black-tailed Crebo. This is her boyfriend, Rico, and he is just an incredibly impressive animal with those huge scales. And I've often said that these guys, if you came across this in the wild and you didn't know what snakes were in the area, you would certainly think that this was like a king cobra or some sort of a cobra for sure. Look at that that animal, just how big the scales are and how heavy bodied they are. And I'm telling you what, these guys eat like insane amount of food. It's like almost like you can't feed them enough. The one knock on them is they are a little bit dirty. They eat a lot and they poop a lot, and that's the one problem. But last year we were able to get some eggs, and hopefully this year we have a few girlfriends for Rico here, Maya of course, and man, I hope that he produces some babies, because I need some more little indigos for sure, little Crebos I should say, not indigos, because they're very closely related to the indigo family. They're both Drymarchon, and gosh, just take a look. Every time I let Snake out, I just can't even believe how awesome it is, so it's cool. Oh, let's keep looking around. What else do I have? You guys know I'm not going to do a show with just showing off cool animals without showing you some blue-tongue skinks, because I'm absolutely obsessed with them. You guys know that. And I'm just going to show you a couple of my favorites. I have a bunch of these and I'm just so obsessed with them. I've said this a million times. I really do believe blue-tongue skinks are like the next huge wave of reptile keeping, just because look at how cool they are. I mean, they look awesome. They just chill out like this, super easy to care for. I mean, I am so obsessed. It's almost dangerous how obsessed I am. I mean, I think about blue-tongue skinks like 23.5 hours a day, but this happens to be a blaze animal from Jeff Green, you know, that beautiful red animal that he calls Blaze. And look at that, just the, my gosh, that's so cool. We have sunsets which are like orange, and of course this is an orange too, but there's more red in the Blaze line, so we're really excited to kind of work those lines separately, work sunsets and work the Blaze line into a bunch of different things. So, oh my gosh, I just can't believe how beautiful that is. Can't wait till next year when I have some of those animals up to size to actually breed into some things. And take a look at this one here. This is another one of my favorites. And again, I'll probably open up every single cage and show you guys, but look at the color on that little guy right there. That is really cool. And what's interesting with blue-tongue skinks is, like when I got this guy, it was a really interesting pairing, the guy that I got it from, but I didn't really think it was going to be that interesting. And then as it grew up, you know, I guess it's just only 3 months old, 2.5, 3 months old. Just look at the color that is coming through with it, or their lack thereof color, I really should say. It's just gotten so pale. I can't wait to see what this animal turns in. As a matter of fact, its sibling is very, very similar, and I can't wait to see what this guy, look at the sibling as well. It's got almost the exact same color. So that's going to be really cool to see how these guys play out. This is the first year that I'm breeding blue-tongue skinks. And as a matter of fact, I think next week I'm going to do a whole show just on how I'm figuring out how to breed it, because listen, I'm no expert. I'm just figuring it out myself. So I'm going to kind of share my frustrations with you guys and just excitement of how things are going, and it's going to be pretty fun. So anyway, stay tuned, because probably next week it's going to be all blue-tongue skinks. So guys, I don't know, I just enjoyed today. I just enjoyed running around, sharing my passion of whatever animals I looked at, not scripting anything, thinking anything out. I hope you guys enjoyed as much as I did, because this is the shows that I love making, just being able to look at animals and just say whatever is on my mind. And as always, I was Facebooking and tweeting my way through it. So make sure to follow me over at SnakeBytesTV and on Instagram at SnakeBytes.tv. Until next week, you've been watching Snake Bites.
Hi, I'm Peter Birch, an Aussie bloke who loves wildlife. My respect for nature started when I was a young boy in rural New South Wales. Since then, it's exploded into an obsession. New episodes every Thursday only on Animal Bites TV.